Welcome everyone to today's lecture on economic rights of women in early India. In this lecture, I would be discussing with you the category of women in comparison to men and also amongst women themselves. We would be talking about several economic and social roles performed by women. We would be talking about the material production, the property relations, the issues of patronage, varna, jati, household, sexuality as well as marriage with specific reference to gender identity. Women's history is an exercise of exploring and re-exploring the sources as well as several social processes and also uncovering the evidence which has been marginalized for so long due to the then existing biases, and also we would be discussing as to why there is a need to incorporate all these issues of gender in the subjects or in the topics that I have mentioned just now. So basically in our course of discussion we would be talking about both the presence as well as absence of women. Women have a twofold relation with history, as they were simultaneously present as well as absent in several historical accounts that one can get hold of. So women were both invisible and comparatively visible from the point of view of what the patriarchal society wanted the futuristic generations to see and to perceive. So therefore, it is generally seen that men are associated with technology, with development, with growth, and in all the works that are delegated to the women, it is basically those tasks that require lot of physical energy. The activities of men were and are always based on the use of advanced technology and better technical know-how. So as a result, when the plough and the loom came to be used, then these became two examples which came to be highly monopolized by men in the entire production process. So one can definitely talk about the existence of gendered technology. So, as has been pointed out by several scholars, instead of economy, the economic processes and the technology have remained gendered. And relevant to study the social notions that give meaning to all these gendered processes is the need of the hour. It is the patriarchy that largely shaped the ends as well as the means of the members of society. So when we talk about the issue of women and work, women's labor in India was largely shaped predominantly by the patriarchal mindset. Till women's work went well with the patriarchal norms and it fitted within the patriarchal norms, they were tolerated and they were allowed to work. But once this was not so, women were considered to be unfit for specific jobs. And the premise that was given time and again was the nature of these jobs that was probably masculine. Now to the specific category of this kind of division and this kind of polarity belong the public women or the ganikas, etc., who were looked down upon with contempt, though the profession of ganikas was not without skill. They required lot of skillful training and learning in the art of music, dance or entertainment. Then also one can talk about Devadasis, who could not go beyond their localities, being the wives of the gods and being dedicated to the temple for their lives. So they could not adopt any other profession and hence were reduced to the state of dependence and destitution. Now coming to the issue of division of labor. Division of labor has evolved historically, and work was tagged as male or female on the basis of historically changeable interests as well as the social relations and the kind of relations of production in which it was carried out. The definition of work is basically the application of any kind of mental or physical effort to any task at hand. So work can clearly be seen as an indicator of social relation and also an indicator of the way social relations were forming. Work is a very important aspect that also indicates the social relations, because it is the work ultimately that connects an individual to the larger social, economic and political superstructure. So though women and men's tasks overlapped in the pre-industrial era, there came to be strict division in their respective tasks within the specific community in the post-industrial phase of civilization. So if we talk about women as manual workers, the hard tasks in the field of transplanting and weeding were generally given to women. In textile manufacturing also, women were generally associated with the jobs of spinning, all the activities related to the spinning process. And in both the sectors of production, the process of plowing and weaving were denied to women, with a few exceptions. So, what was then the field of a woman's work? It was definitely the household. Household came to be treated as something that was to be done exclusively, and it was here that the roles of mother and wife also came to prevail. So the household emerged as a place where much of her labor was to be deployed, and the coexistence of wage as well as non-wage labor made it extremely difficult to define women's work. This was a problem in the past, and it continues to be even in the present context. So from here we go on to the issue of gendered productivity. The loom and the plow, they both communicated the ownership of control, the ownership as well as the control of means of production, and it also kind of indicated some kind of a control over the ultimate output. Hence, women came to be considered as ritually impure, and they were not allowed to touch things in order to maintain purity. The productive as well as the other technologies came to acquire a gendered meaning. Now, most of the economic processes need to be studied from this gender lens. So, women have acted as hawkers, or they have sold fruits, vegetables, milk products or grains, and they have even carried water. So the sector of building industry and so many other economic sectors did involve the presence of women, and this has also been attested by a traveller of 17th century who found the involvement of women in India with construction activity as quite unique, and whatever women did outside the home was translated at a very low wage as compared to women, and this kind of disparity continues even today, especially in the private sector. So with a lot of contempt towards women's work, we have a 16th century reference to Meena Bazaar of Akbar, where the sellers, the buyers, they were women, and many of craftspersons were also women. So women who participated in several trading activities, especially those who were engaged in some kind of a retail trade, were looked down upon, and they were treated by the society with contempt. And it was believed that probably these women were compromising in order to have a public role, and so this was not really well appreciated. besides manual work, women also were involved in several activities related to entertainment. And if we talk about the public realm, women did earn their livelihood by participating in several of these activities. Different kind of activities were performed by the female servants or as well as the slaves, both for the royal ladies as well as men. However, since our discussion would be focusing on early India, now I would be talking about the transition from pre-state to state formation. As has been pointed out by R.S. Sharma and Romila Thapar, the Vedic political organizations were pre-state social formations, and they could be described as proto-states rather than full-fledged institution of state. Now, states in Indian history first materialized in the post-Vedic period, when the primary egalitarian feature of the tribal society in the mid-Ganga valley gave way or came to be replaced by a highly stratified class-based society, which also became caste-based society in due course of time. As a result, there emerged a number of inequalities of property, power, and the kind of monarchical and aristocratic oligarchical structure that emerged required lot of coercion for perpetuation of inequalities of property. The Nandas and after that the Mauryas in Magad founded the first large scale states that could be described as states in an institutional manner. Now, Romila Thapar has also interpreted that the Earth Shastra endorsed and supported a highly centralized system where the king's control over the entire exercise was supreme and it was unquestionable. Now, it was in this background that we need to analyze what were the rights of women, specifically the economic rights. And the discussion would basically revolve around the economic rights of daughters, married as well as unmarried, then women at marriage, after marriage, wives, widows, and prostitutes. There are several ancient texts like the Dharma Sutras, the epic tradition, then the Buddhist and Jaina literature, as well as the later Dharma Shastras, which have indicated the important role played by women while performing labor at home. However, even if that labor or that task was heavy and it was time consuming, it was largely regarded as unproductive. Again, this kind of consideration towards women is not only a thing of the past. Even today, this is the kind of attitude that one has towards the labor that a woman is performing at home while doing several tasks. So, women's sole worth lay in their reproductive role, and even there she was seen as the field, as the harvest. And not as the master of the harvest, because the harvest, that is the child and especially the sons, they belonged to the seed owner. And who was the seed owner? Of course, it was the husband. So the entire worth of women came to be measured in the form of their reproductivity and their reproductive role. The anxiety to leave the property to the legitimate heir led to a very strict confinement of women in the inner apartments, that is in the private sphere, and this also required greater vigilance by the males. Women were skilled only in the domestic course, and hence they came to be considered as economically a burden on their family members and especially a burden on their husbands. Now, here one also can talk about the comparison that emerged between the son and the daughter. The textual sources categorically called a son a blessing, while a girl child came to be described as a curse or a burden. However, there were some exceptions like Atri in a late Samhita, which says that a maiden had a share in her father's or brother's or ancestral property, but those references were very few. Now, one also needs to understand the role played by the lawgivers in this entire scheme of things. So, Manu laid down that Brahmin brothers should separately give a quarter of their share in parental property to an unmarried sister. And then there was Gautama, who said that unmarried daughters who were not well settled shall inherit some part of property of their father. Then there was a text, Taittiriya Samhita, around 8th century BC, which indicated that women in general and sister in particular were not entitled to a share of the family property. Now, this kind of discourse also can be understood with a better perspective and with a gendered lens when one talks about different forms of marriage. So, most of the 8 forms of marriages that had been described, in most of these forms of marriages, it was the bride's father who paid the groom's party, except in the Asura form of marriage. So, Asura was the only kind of marriage in which the payment was made by the groom's parents to the wife's parents. And in rest of the marriages like the Brahma, Deva, Arsha, in all these forms of marriages, it was invariably the bride's father who had to give wealth, ornaments, a pair of oxen or other gifts according to his ability to the groom's family. Now, there was also a concept of Istri Dhan, which could be described as the bride's wealth. Now, the bride's wealth was of 3 different kinds, and these have been described as Pana, Yautaka and Shudayaka. Pana was with the wealth with which the bride had been purchased. Then Yautaka were the gifts given to the girl at the time of marriage by her relations, and Shaudaika referred to those gifts that had been given to the bride by her friends and relations. However, there was also a dichotomy of dowry and bride price, which can clearly be seen in the several rules and regulations that had been laid down by the lawmakers. Society completely disapproved of the bride's father accepting money from the groom, whereas vice versa was the norm. So, as has been remarked by Manu, a father should not take any bride price or kanya shulk, for by taking dowry or kanya shulk out of greed, then the girl's father is probably selling the offspring. So, therefore, it was considered as immoral. Even the acceptance of a pair of cows and bullocks by the father of the bride from the bridegroom was considered as immoral and illegal. However, there was no text that forbade the groom's father from accepting dowry, and that transaction was not described as a sale. So, clearly there were different norms that were in practice for males and for females. Then dowry came to indicate some kind of the social status also, and this resulted in the social demotion of women. The very idea and belief that when a man marries, he saves a girl from the situation of maidenhood came to be popularized. So, it was made legitimate and logical for the father of the girl to pay the groom a price for this help that the groom was doing by marrying the daughter. So, there was now gradually a desire for ostentation and display of wealth also in course of exchange of gifts. And this aspect of the dowry also becomes more illogical, because whatever wealth had been acquired was not part of Istridhan. The dowry paid by the bride's father was given to the groom and his father. Hence, it did not become part of Istridhan, and the wife had no say on its use or misuse. So, the entire wealth that had been given by the bride's father did not fall in the category of Istridhan. Gifts given to her by friends and relations at her parents' place, only they which were known as Yautaka, could be described as Istridhan. Then a text by Aparaka indicates that Shodaika was under the full control of wife, so that also could be considered as part of Istridhan, and neither the husband nor her sons or her brothers could acquire that Istridhan, because women had complete control over it. So, a very important fact that emerges is that dowry was not Istridhan because it was given at the instance of the groom's father. Now, coming to the concept of property, wife's property, here again there is an indication that husband had control over wife's property. As has been marked by Yajnavalkya, a husband is not liable to make good the property of his wife taken by him during famine or during performance of specific duty, or whenever there was a need for the family. So, this clearly indicates that a husband had right over his wife's property. Then the Maitrayani Samhita, which was a later Vedic text of around 8th century BC, says that the relations of a woman who depended on the income of that woman, and if that woman was performing several jobs like stitching clothes or selling carts or ornaments. So, if the relations or the family members of that woman were depending on that income, then this was kind of a sin. So, a working woman was definitely not considered as a very good alternative in order to help the family come out of penury or from the state of poverty. And then another lawgiver, Katyayana, stated that whatever a woman was earning through these several crafts ultimately was the property of the husband, and it was the husband who had complete control over whatever was being earned. So, whatever a woman was earning herself was not even her own, and what remained was meager Istridhan, which actually was not much. Now, even Manu has mentioned several sources of Istridhan, but he also categorically stated that if a wife was spendthrift or wicked or she was wasteful, then a wife had no right even over her Istridhan, and that could very easily be acquired by the husband. So, it was for the in-laws to decide whether a wife was spendthrift, and thus by giving this logic, her Istridhan could also be snatched away, what legally belonged to her in the original scheme of things. So, the consciousness shared by the society and the woman herself that she was a bharya, that is, she had to be fed by her husband, came to indicate specific kind of socio-economic relations. And only the very rich women like the queens, whose wealth had been augmented by political power, came to have some kind of substantial control over their money. Thanks a lot.